Just show me then go you hold that.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth and last press conference of IFFR's Tiger competition. We are streaming live from a studio in, guess, Rotterdam. And today we will highlight the three remaining titles of this year's Tiger competition. The flagship Tiger competition is IFFR's unrivaled platform for emerging film talent with a distinct and modernist voice. Today, we will be discussing and speaking with the directors of Criança, Projecto Phantasma, and The Clown Messenger. We will present each film and filmmaker for 10 minutes individually, followed by a Q&A session with all the filmmakers collectively. Dear members of the press, please send in your questions via the Q&A box below your video screen. If the questions are not featured during the press conference, we will follow up with you via email. So please do not forget to share your contact details. And on that note, let's get started. The first title we will be focusing on today is Criança by Marguerite de Hillerin and Félix Dutilloy-Liégeois. The film takes us back to mid-16th century Portugal. Bella was adopted by a merchant to replace the man's real son, and the world is his oyster. A fiancé has been selected for him, and a promising career in trade awaits him. So, why does he still secretly meet with Rosa, a servant girl from Morocco? The drama unfolds calmly, yet inexorably. Quiet inevitability is reflected in the production style, with its carefully staged tableau and intimate close-ups. But the fresh and sunny theatrics cannot dispel the sense that everything is about to fall apart. Death is always close in Criança. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the filmmakers Marguerite and Félix. Thank you so much for joining us, and good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to have you both here with us. So perhaps it would be good that we start with the novella itself. When did you first encounter Kleist's novella?
We've been reading Kleist for some times when we met Paolo, and he said he offered us to do our first feature. So that in Kleist writing, there were many short stories we liked, but their feeling that we freely adapted was very full of themes that we were sensitive to, such as loss, disappearance, the confusion of identity, questions of love, and so on. And we had the feeling that Kleist left some cracks and holes in his writing that allowed us to fully adapt and move to another medium, which is cinema. And that's why it's a great author, because he made us more free reading him. And therefore we were able to, his main character in the short story is called Nicolo, and he's more of a Tartuffe. He's a little bit more shadowed than Bella that we saw in the extract, the young guy. And so therefore we were able to just put our own self in those cracks and to built another story a little bit different, in the sense that we try to push the shadows and the light at the same time, with who we are.
No, I find this quite interesting that you say these themes that you feel like you would like to explore deeper, because I think it relates also. There is a connection with an earlier project of yours, Les Ruines en été, which is also about the loss of a child. So can you talk a little bit more about your interest in that?
Yeah. So the loss of a child in this movie, it's the child of Pierre. Is a tragedy, maybe the worst tragedy, and maybe it's because it's the worst we are interested by, and but all the movie, our movie Criança, is based and built on these intimate tragedies. For example, Maria lived also a drama long years ago. Bella too, because he's an orphan. But maybe that's why it's a little bit different than Les Ruines en été, summer ruins. In this movie, the loss of a child is not the heart of the story. The story is more about a child who replaces another child. And because he replaces another child, all around him, everyone around him has some, expectations. So, yeah, he has, Bella has to play with his own desires, desires of a young man like us, and also the desires applied to him by the others. For the others, and for Pierre, his new father particularly, Bella is the one no one wants to lose. But every child loses oneself, because every child grow and become adults.
Yeah,
and yeah.
We can also relate it to the loss of innocence in a way as well. And we should mention as well that the title A Criança means a child as well. So it's good for the audience as well to know that, for the press. So a question about you being both French filmmakers. However, the story is set in Portugal, and the connection with the country is very strong. The film has been produced by Paulo and Juan Branco, and the cast is a mix of French and Portuguese actors. So I wonder, how do two young French filmmakers end up making a film in Portugal?
So when we started to write, Paulo mentioned that we would probably shoot in Portugal. So Kleist is a German writer, so that's the first distance between us and Kleist. Then Kleist's story is set in Italy, so that's the second distance between France and the country where the story happens. And when we thought about shooting in Portugal, we were very interested in using it as a material to write. And so we digged into Portugal history, and we could have made a movie with only French actors, but we were also very curious to meet Portuguese actors and to get a chance to really take account of everything we had the chance to work with, every element and every person. So therefore, that's why we chose the middle of the 16th century in Portugal. That's also a very interesting period, because it's like in the story we wanted to tell, it's in between. It's in between eras. It's in between apogee and decline. It's the very beginning of, not the very beginning, but things that until nowadays have consequences like the great discoveries, the empires, colonial empires. Even though it's not, it's material we use to, in a way, feed ourselves to make the story more dense, and that was a pleasure to, take into account that we were shooting in Portugal.
Yeah.
And we were very lucky because we stay a long time in Portugal during the preparations, like 6 months. So we had the possibility to really feel every feelings of landscapes, of houses, of faces also, and it was very interesting for us and fascinating in a way to discover.
Yeah, I feel that's true, that you gave yourself quite a challenge, but in a way it was a generous gift to you as well, because it allowed you to learn so much and deepen your knowledge and interest and curiosities about it. And there's one thing that must have been made quite an impression on you, and this is that you work with master cinematographer Mario Barroso. How it is? Can you tell us more about this experience? Because of course the look of the film is wonderful and yet familiar in some ways, especially of reminiscent of old masters of Portuguese cinema. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah.
The work with Mario Barroso was very how can I say,
gracious.
Gracious. Mario is a man very elegant, very delicate, and since our first meeting, he tried to feel what we wanted as young people, as young director. And so he tried to understand us, to understand our desires, and after that he added some singular touch, his touch, and
yes, and he really liked the script, so that was also a great way to build a common language and to really make it an encounter. And we had a great team built around us. We had people like Mario that are very experienced, that are masters in their own department, and we were working as well with people of our age, between 23, 22 and 26. So that made the relations during the set very positive, in the sense that everyone had something to learn from the others. So that was very rich for us, and yes, and Mario was very careful with us and very attentive to what we tried to tell.
Yeah, the story is sad, but the shooting was very enjoyable.
And I think we can also see that this sort of cross-generational collaboration really delivered something, that is, as I said, reminiscent of some grand masters of Portuguese cinema, and yet infused with something new and refreshing that you two brought into the project. So thank you very much, Marguerite and Félix. We will see you back at the end of the show during the Q&A. And now onwards to our next contender. The next film we will discuss today is Projecto Phantasma by Roberto Doveris. This fresh and funny second feature film follows 30-year-old Pablo, whose dream of acting in a film seems more impossible than ever. Life takes a turn for the worse when his housemate departs, leaving him with rent costs, a collection of plants, a dog, a woolly jumper, and a house ghost. On top of it all, Pablo is still secretly in love with his ex-boyfriend. Slices of life, sometimes pasted over transparent line animations, create an augmented reality that depicts the world Pablo and his peers inhabit. They find recognition, friendship, and hope in the intimacy of their neighborhood and through the use of social media. Let's welcome filmmaker Roberto Doveris. A very good and early morning to you, Roberto. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. It's going to be sunrise in a moment, so live.
Maybe we can witness that with you. You're calling us from Chile, is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So, did I understand correctly that you shot the film in good parts in your own flat? And so,
yes.
if these are your surroundings, I'm curious to know how much of Pablo is you.
That's a tricky question. I think it's 50-50 because the main actor that plays the role was my flatmate 5 years ago. So I know him very well. And I think it's 50-50. I mean, I wrote the film inspired by him. You know, there's a sweetness in the character that's definitely his. And he's so sweet and naive. And I think he also has a lot of what the character is. Not only me, I mean, of course, it's me because I wrote it and it's my apartment. And there's a lot of friends of mine that, they are portrayed in the film. But it's also the work of Juan Cano, which is the main actor.
And I think we can recognize that you're really, that sense of familiarity, you really can translate it and use it very well when, expressing yourself in the film as well. So that I felt kind of went also outside your flat into the neighborhoods. I wonder how much of the neighborhood that we get to see is invented or changed from what it ordinarily is.
I think it's also 50-50. I mean, there's some neighbors that I used actually, and at some point, because of the COVID situation, we weren't allowed to move through neighbors. You were only allowed to move in your own neighborhood. So I think that's a very interesting thing that happens because we were forced to shoot in the same neighborhood. And it's my neighborhood. So everything you see there is really around the corner.
So now we know quite well where do you live and how this daily life looks like. But there is a question that maybe it's not so 50-50, or let's see. When did animation become part of your project? And more importantly, what's your general attitude toward ghosts?
What do you mean? I don't get it.
I mean, let's first start with the animation because we see the film. In the film, the ghosts become parts of the story, and it's an animated one. So when did you decide? When did you decide to make it part of the story? Was that something from the very beginning?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I wasn't sure about the technique, but I made everything possible, for the VFX time. And when I was doing the VFX, I decided that it was tender and sweeter to make a nice animation than, I don't know, a dark, creepy VFX, because the film, it's supposed to be tender and warm and not a creepy film. So I think I thought about it in the beginning, but I wasn't sure until I was editing the film.
And how much is that? So the question, maybe ghost-related question, we can rephrase it. I mean, the title of the film, and this is something we can also perhaps explain to the viewers, is Proyecto Phantasma. So how much, how did you come to this title?
I think in Spanish, it makes sense that we use also the word fantasma not only for a ghost, but also for a parallel project or a hidden project. And this was a hidden project. So I titled Proyecto Phantasma from the very beginning. And I think it makes sense in English as well, because the translation we used is phantom, which also, like something hidden or invented. And I think it worked. I didn't want to remove the project. At some point, my own characters are artists. and they are, developing projects. So I think it makes sense as well as, the singer and songwriter is, making a new album, and this actor wants to, play a role in a film. So I think it makes sense as well to keep the project for me.
It's a fantastic title, and I like the sound of it, even when we are presenting it internationally here. So what you mentioned before, you wanted to also bring some cheerfulness or some joy to your film, and the way how I experience it is indeed that the film is a mix of different genres. We can see it perhaps primarily as a comedy with drama, romance, and of course, fantastic elements. So was this the initial intention when writing the script, or again, did the idea evolve to this mix of genre that it is now, that we see it as a final result?
No, definitely from the very beginning. I mean, everything what happens in the film, even if you feel it fresh and spontaneous, it's really written in the script. So sorry to disappoint you. I'm very controlling person, so everything was settled up from the very beginning. And I really like to play with genres, so I'm always trying, to scratch the limits between genres. I love horror films, so I'm always, flirting with some horror thing. But I also, watch all kind of films, and I think it's, you know, the good thing of making a small film is that you have freedom and you can play with things that you cannot play if you have a big budget and a lot of pressure. So I think every time I direct, I try to play with genres and make it fun for me.
And how was it to work to involve in the project your friends or your colleagues? As you say, you're very you want your film to be very scripted and acted out in a certain way. Tell us more about this collaboration on set. Yeah.
It was amazing. I think I don't know if this is very professional to say, but for me the film was also the perfect excuse to meet my friends again. We were separate 6 months at least. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were really, closed in our houses, and so I really wanted to collaborate with these people because they are not only my friends, but also I admire all of them, their work. So I think it was very collaborative. I think they were really like trying to add something. So what I had, was the main narrative structure, but every single detail, it comes from them.
It's great to
I think
hear
that's
that.
cinema
Sorry.
anyway. Like
I'm sorry?
you are very. I think that's cinema.
Of
Like
course it
you're
is, yeah.
always very very prepared, but then in the set, a lot of things happens, and you have to be open to that.
Yeah, and I think we can see that as well. There is a sense of playfulness in it as well that doesn't necessarily come, from only from the script and the story, although it's there, but the way how you intertwine different genres and breaking certain conventions and then also bringing into something quite unexpected. I think we can see that everyone has enjoyed working on it, and I think that's a great achievement as well. I know that you have worked for several years in an agency promoting Chilean films, so I wonder, is this something that influences your filmmaking, having an idea what is successful for the rest of the world? Yeah.
I worked 5 years in Cinema Chile, which is the international agency to promote Chilean films in the world. And I was there, like an editor in chief. So more than making networking, I was watching films, interviewing directors, and writing about films. So I will say that yes, of course, that influenced me. But to be fair, I get the job in the first place because I already watched a lot of films. I was already a fan of Chilean films before that. So yeah, I think your question is interesting because when you see this film and my previous film as well, you get to know really quickly that I love films. you know. And yes, I'm influenced by that. I mean,
Yeah,
I
and
love films.
yeah, and now you share this passion in your own particular language with the rest of the world. So I think it's quite fantastic. And thank you very much, Roberto. Members of the press, do send your questions to the filmmakers via the Q&A box underneath this screen. And now, let's move on to the third and last film of today. And the final title of the Tiger competition is The Cloud Messenger by Rahat Mahajan. At the strict boarding school in the misty foothills of the Himalayan mountains, Jayawardena falls madly in love with Tarini. Something cautiously develops between the two timeless lovers. Their meeting proves to be the fulfillment of a desire, referencing a classic Indian tale about tragic lovers and an evil, jealous ruler. Contemporary and ancient storytelling meet in this astonishing fusion of a coming-of-age school drama and an experimental ghost tale. Rahat's own boarding school experience provided both the inspiration and the principal location for the film, as it came about in collaboration with the students and staff of the former school. It is my pleasure to introduce you to filmmaker Rahat Mahajan. Good evening to you, Rahat.
Hello.
It's so lovely to have you here with us. So let's start with something that I also mentioned in the introduction, and that is how about the boarding school itself. How did you end up in it as a kid, and how did the staff and current students react when you returned there and told them that you want to shoot a film with them?
I ended up in the same boarding school because my father went to the same school as well, and my cousin, who's actually made the music in the film, is from the school. My real brother is from the school, so there's a full legacy of the family to go to the school, because it's in India, like especially where I'm from. My parents stay in a small town, so they wanted me to have like a more holistic education. And that's the reason I went to that school. And when I returned to the school is, as in I've been going back since 2011, because I've been working on this since 2010. And every time I return, they always welcome me with like a lot of generosity and with open arms. And when I made the film, finally, the kids were exceptional, as in the school was exceptional, as in they just gave me the whole school almost like a film set. And I was allowed to, as in all my film crew was there with me, and the kids, a lot of them were a part of the film making process. And I cannot be more thankful, because especially for a first film, especially a film that is very difficult to make in terms of the time constraints we had, because we shot it in 37 days, the primary schedule at the school. And there were a lot of setups and we had to move very quickly. And sometimes, and we were shooting in an active school, as in the school was going on when we were shooting it. So sometimes we got the kids for just probably an hour, and we had to shoot like 4 or 5 sequences with them. So the kids had to be very much in alignment with what we were doing, and they were very supportive and very, very helpful. So I think that's
well, yes, and indeed, we see them being, in a school where there is a lot of discipline required, very strict, sort of rigid rules. So I think at least they were quite well trained, to jump in on a set and then do what you as a director want from them. So maybe that sort of worked, because I was quite impressed by the level of discipline, that the teachers, have upon the students. But let's talk a little bit about the story and what was the sort of the origin, the genesis of the Cloud Messenger. And then within, I would perhaps like to discuss also Kalidas's poem in this context. Yeah.
It's a very vast question, actually, because it's the genesis of the story happened because I had happened to go to the boarding school, and I was working in Bombay at that time, and I'd worked there for a few years. And I started writing a story about my boarding school, and it was a few months, and it would almost became like a cathartic process where I was going into my own impressions and my body and trying to figure out certain why certain trauma has come up and why I am the way I am. And so that is what led to the birth of the story. But as I went along, it just transformed and became a story about love and a story about becoming. And my own rites of passage while making the film, the past 10 years, like whatever I have personally gone through has become a part of the film. And it's almost as if the film has happened along with my own process of going through my own rites of passage of making the film, and that is what the film is. It's very much a part of my being and my spirit. In terms of Kalidas, I am very inspired by the Indian aesthetical systems and the Indian style of story, the Indian systems of storytelling and Indian mythology and Indian poetry, and the sensitive nature of how they perceive the cosmos actually, and at one level, but also so sensitive to what is immediately around them. And Kalidasa's poem, for example, the Meghdut, though this is very loosely inspired by it, it's through the perspective of a cloud. And just 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, somebody thinking like that you actually, the poem is being told via the perspective of a cloud, and that's so vast. It's just a thought, And even like another poem by Kalidas called Ritu Sahara, it's about the seasons, and it's like nature in conversation with itself, and how like each animal, each plant, each being is like communicating to each other in harmony as the seasons pass. So I was very inspired by Kalidas, and so it forms the crux, the Indian system, not just Kalidas, but also the system from the Natya Shastra. As in, I've picked up like a structure of the Mukha Ragas, which is the 4 expressions from the Natya Shastra, and it's the very deep core and structure of the film is very Indian, and over that constructing something which is because again we're dealing with the medium of film, which is the most contemporary medium of storytelling. The challenging part was not the marriage of the oldest forms and the newest forms. The challenging part was of how to keep the audience engaged and how to keep it rich and potent and also interesting, and not make it into some didactic affair of just trying to make a point. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
I think that really also displays how rich the inspirations are from Indian poems, but also great cinema legacy as well that inspired you on this very long journey. Because also you yourself said it took 10 years, of processing and developing these projects to get what you are. So of course we're not gonna manage to break it all down in 10 minutes. But there is something that I'm curious about, because I see it very particularly in Indian cinema, and this is that the style itself. Did you, from the beginning on, want to mix the aesthetics of classical narrative cinema with especially Indian avant-garde filmmaking? And what must have been a challenge or an interesting, challenge for you is to find the right balance between the two.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the beginning, because it was just an idea, as in I was trying to do it, and it was very, I feel very plastic. The experimentation of trying to merge the two. So I let go of wanting to just to force the union of Indian classical cinema or Indian classical storytelling and the story of the protagonists that are there in the school. So I started concentrating actually on the protagonist and the people in the film. And as I started becoming more and more attuned with the people in the story, I actually started putting in a lot of my own dreams and my own processes that were coming about in the process. And I feel that the process of actually writing the film became like a ritual in itself, which is also synonymous to the Indian systems, of actually making a communion with the source or with the cosmic forces, and letting the story be told through me, and me just being just the navigator or just the pen in the hands of a bigger force wanting to tell the story, and not trying to control it too much. And as I went along, just for example, like the organic interpretation of the film happens through all these forms from South India, like Kuriyatam and Kathakali and Thayam. And after I actually met Kapila, who's the director of traditional performances in the film, it is then actually the marriage started getting more and more richer, because it was not as if like I just induced those forms into the film before and then tried to recreate it. It was upon meeting her, like I'd already finished a draft, and that's why it's a process of constant evolution. I'd already finished a draft. I met her, and the moment I met her, she introduced me to a new world altogether of Kathakali, of Thayam, and I went away again for a few months, introduced those forms into the film, and then went back and stayed there for a couple of months and did a workshop with her father. And then I did 3 or 4 workshops with all the performers, and actually very organically tried to intersperse the forms into the story rather than imposing anything on it.
Wow, this really speaks volumes, I think, to the complexities not only of making this film, but also to even scratch the surface of rich cultural heritage and legacy of India. So I think we could spend pretty much hours not talking about that, but also your film, because you did create something on your own and quite unique of it. So thank you very much, Rahat. And now we are going to move to the questions from the press members. And we will begin with the directors of Criança, Marguerite and Félix. And we will start with a question that it's quite a long one, so bear with me while I'm reading it out to you. It says, you have defined your film as a family fresco unfolding in 6 days in a place near Lisbon as we said already, in the mid-16th century. This fresco portrays a family which is far from being a conventional one. So how did you build up these characters?
All the characters, sorry?
How did you build this unconventional family and the characters? I think the interest comes from this idea of a portrait of a family, which may be considered unusual for the time. So the question is also, what did you bring into the build of these characters?
Yes, for sure. So yes, it's because we decided to. In Clash Short Story, the family lives in Rome, I think, so it's a big city. We decided to place our story outside of Lisbon, and that allowed us lots of freedom, because therefore the family was out of the rush of the city, the exact constraint of those times. So we were free to make them freer a little bit unconventional. That is, everyone could live in the way they wanted to, with less secrets, especially for Maria and Jacques and Pierre, who are in a relationship, and Bella. He can just walk around and people won't, he will meet other people, but he's not as watched as if they were living in the city. So yes, we felt we would, make them freer, but they're living in a place that is apparently beautiful and peaceful. It's surrounded by nature, a nice landscape. It's a sensation of harmony, and then their feelings are a little bit more complex than this apparent beauty. And that's why we can see when they suffer and how they are in contradiction with this apparent harmony.
And another question here says, how the two of you work together? How did you, arrange to divide the tasks, and who is more suited for what?
We talk a lot. We know each other since 8 years. So no, I know Marguerite by her. No, not by her, but I know Marguerite, and Marguerite knows me. And so we talk a lot before to shoot. And when we shoot, we don't talk a lot. Sometimes after a take, we just have a look. And after this look, I think we know what was okay, what was good, and what was not okay and wrong. So after that, it's instinctive. Marguerite or me goes to the technical team, and the other one goes to the comedians, the actors. But it's permanently in change. Nothing is fixed.
Yeah, it's like Roberto mentioned on set. You get very prepared before. Everything is written down. Everything is more or less settled, and when you're there, you're prepared to accident. That's why we talk a lot. So we have the same feeling of what we want to do and achieve, and then on set we're just very open to any accident, anything that is related to life, and
especially in the nature. That's why also we like to shoot in outdoors.
Yeah. And I think this is also what we can call a very, very good synchronicity between you two. Thank you, Marguerite and Félix. I'm going to move on now to Roberto. And a question that goes like this. It says, the film portrays a certain generation of young people in their 30s. There are different characters, all of them charming in their own way, which I agree very much with. Where did you find your inspiration, and why did you decide to put them at the center of the story?
I think they are very inspired in real people and real situations. I don't know if you have the same feeling, but sometimes you see that reality it's even more ridiculous than films. Sometimes we think fiction is funny, but reality is funnier, and yeah, I wanted to bring those strange odds, people to the screen because they are real and they are fun. I mean, it's not that the actors are playing themselves because they are acting, but the characters are inspired in people I know. So actually my friends that are watching even the trailer, they say, did you were inspired by me in this character? And I think I have to make a lot of explanations after with my friends because there's a lot of, real life in the film.
And you mentioned earlier that this was a phantom project. You started working on it because you had to stop other bigger projects because of the pandemic. How are your other projects now coming along that even though the pandemic is still with us? Are they moving on? What's the current situation, Roberto?
Yeah, actually, this was shot right after the first year of pandemic. So yeah, after that we are kind of used to it. So we are shooting again, and projects are moving on. I'm a producer as well. So when I said that, I was talking about my films as producer. So we are, moving on.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I'm going to move on now to the questions for Rahat, the director of the Cloud Messenger. And it says, what exactly interested you about the tale you're evoking here? The fate of the two teenagers seemed destined or doomed to play out. Did you hear me? I can't actually hear you as well, but I suppose you didn't hear my question, right? Should I repeat it? Yeah, I will.
The
I
second
also
part
was
of
like
it.
reading it and thinking, I'm not sure if I understood it, so let's go again. So what exactly interested you about the tale you're evoking here? The fate, and and I think what you're evoking, it's the fate of the two teenagers that they seemed destined or doomed to play out as a love couple. Yeah.
So it's the tale of the teenagers, of course, but also it's a story of hope actually, because all of us go through so much in our lives, and we either lost somebody, or uh, we ourselves are facing some extreme challenges that we have to, and we keep blaming the whole world for that. And in a sense, the story was a metaphor for whatever is happening, whatever bad is happening is in a way just a preparation for you to become what you're meant to be, and to overcome that with a certain grace, and to continue learning from all the difficulties that are coming by, and to be in this glorious dream that we are in this life. So the love story of the two lovers is just one metaphor in it, and it's not just a story about the two lovers. It's a story about yourself as well,
Yeah.
like your own journey into becoming.
Yes, yeah, I can recognize that. And there is an interesting question for you here. It says, in terms of cultural identity, your film is unusual as it is neither, there is an expert here, look at this, as it is neither the typical all-Indian Hindi film, nor clearly belonging to the one of so-called regional cinemas. Can you talk about this in-betweenness?
So I'm very fond of Indian cinema, and I'm very fond, and I feel that it comes from Indian mythology. If you read Indian mythology, it's extremely melodramatic. It's very rich, and even, for example, in my film, it's there is a lot of melodrama, but my approach to that way of storytelling, in that form of storytelling, basically, was to approach it with a certain sophistication, and not in a crass manner. So I am actually like the Indian culture itself is very rich, and if you watch even Kuriyatam, it's such a sophisticated form of story of theater. What Kapila is performing in the film, and the performance takes around 6 hours or 7 hours, and she performs probably just one page within that time, and each gesture is just one word, so it's very slow, but within that performance, which feels so sophisticated and so incredible, she's talking about this character who's presently a king. The king becomes a bird in the next gesture, the bird becomes like the god in the next gesture, and in the next gesture the god becomes a bee sitting on a flower, and then there's a huge storm. It's very rich. It's very, like, there's a lot that happens in it, but like just the way that story is told with the sophistication is what I find interesting. And in the same way, within the cinematic form, I wanted to make the montage sophisticated, of how that story that I'm interpreting can be told. The story is still very, very simple, very melodramatic, very rich, yet my gestures is the camera, and how I have used the montage to tell the story, and that is what interests me, and the form of it is what I find interesting.
And I think quite a few people have recognized that as this quite well-framed question. Thank you very much, Rahat. That's all we have time for today. If the questions are not featured during this press conference, we will follow up with you via email, so please do not forget to share your contact details. Tomorrow, on February 2nd, the Tiger competition winners will be announced, so please tune in to our award ceremony at 3:30 p.m. The Tiger jury is They will grant 3 prizes, the Tiger Award worth 40,000 euros and 2 special jury awards worth 10,000 euros each. Thank you to all the filmmakers for joining us today, and thank you to all joining the Tiger competition press conferences this year. Please get in touch with IFFR press office to arrange your one-on-one interviews with Tiger competition filmmakers and other talent. We hope to see you tomorrow at the award ceremony. In the meantime, also enjoy the rest of this year's program through our partners at festivalscope.pro. Thank you again and see you soon.
Just show me then go you hold that.